I have never made a series of these commentaries on one subject before, but this is my third one about the Sydney Festival, unfortunately done out of necessity. We watched with dismay how it was targeted by the BDS activists, who regrettably did achieve some success with a few dozen artists withdrawing in support of the Palestinian cause. The fact that terrorist organisation Hamas stated approval of the whole Megillah added an irony that was no doubt lost on those performers. And as previously discussed, according to the IHRA definition, the BDS movement is clearly and obviously anti-Semitic. However, unlike the wishy-washy language coming from some of our communal leaders, it was particularly refreshing to see Paul Fletcher, our Federal Arts Minister, stand up and proclaim in no uncertain terms that the festival boycotters were, quote, useful idiots of Hamas. Now there's a mensch. To his credit, the New South Wales Labor opposition arts spokesman, Walt Secord, did offer a measure of support for the need to have anti-BDS laws in this country. He went on to say that any organisation applying a BDS program should forfeit its right to any public funding. And that's exactly right. However, when it came to the Federal Labor Party, its leader and our alternative Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has said absolutely nothing on this subject. Neither has Federal Opposition spokesman for the arts, Tony Burke. But then his electorate of Watson in the western suburbs of Sydney has a particularly high percentage of Muslim voters. So why expect him to take a moral stance on something important when there are cheap votes involved? Now, Labor supporters will be saying, but in July only last year, Albanese stated unequivocally that he was opposed to the BDS movement, and that in fact he has also rejected a motion on this by Bob Carr at more than one of their conferences. This is true, but here's the rub. Those comments of Albanese on the BDS movement were made to a Jewish audience, specifically in an address to the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. So whilst the alternative Prime Minister said all the right things, it was to an audience that expected to hear exactly that. In other words, he took the easy way out. If he wants to be taken seriously on Israel and Jewish issues, Albanese needs to stand up publicly and state this very same position clearly and loudly and to the whole Australian audience. Mr. Albanese, either you are for or you are against the BDS movement. You can't be a bit each way and whispering platitudes to a partisan audience, saying what they want to hear, is just not going to cut it. Which reminds me that it is not for no reasons that current affairs host Paul Murray on Sky News Australia always calls him each way elbow. You are spot on, Paul. So Mr. Albanese, until you do this and demonstrate that you and your party really mean it, we can only assume that you are very lightweight on Middle Eastern politics and not a genuine friend of Israel. Everyone knows that Labor is drifting further leftwards and that there is increasing pressure to sideline Israel in favour of some fraudulent entity called a State of Palestine that would start in Judea and Samaria, but not likely end there. We also know from the friends you keep, Mr. Albanese, that this is all just a euphemism for the total eradication of Israel. It's just not good enough, Albo. Come election time, if you want to be taken seriously by Jewish voters, then we need to know exactly where you really stand. This is Alan Friedman for the Australian Jewish Association.